Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second episode of Empower Your PharmD, a show for you to kickstart your career with a PharmD. Here is Dr. Nguyen with me today again to discuss all about residency. But before we get into today's episode, don't forget to check out the contents from Empower PharmD as well as subscribing to the Student Arts Network. All right, let's start off with something that kind of just start off with your story about residency and how was it? How was it applying to residency? And is there any challenges along the way?
Yes, definitely. There's lots of challenges. I feel like I have a lot of I experience a lot of challenges throughout that phase of my life, and so this is a reason why I wanted to do this kind of episodes with you because I want to make sure people don't fall into the same problems that I went through. In terms of residency, residency application and rotations kind of fall in an interesting spot because what happens is you only go through part of your rotations and then during the fall part of your rotations you're already working on your applications, you're already building those relationships to obtain letter of recommendations and things like that. So unfortunately, if your other rotations happen in the spring, you may not really get to have an idea of what you wanted to do. And I think I fell into this problem. I mentioned to you before that I thought I wanted to do ambulatory care. And um, I had most of my ambulatory care rotations in the fall because that was kind of what I was wanting to, you know, to apply to the programs that were more ambulatory care focused. And what ended up happening was my ICU rotation, my hospital acute care rotation was in the spring. And so, I didn't really have a lot of acute care experience before I applied to residency or yeah, just residency programs. And so I feel like maybe that was part of the problem was I didn't really understand what I was wanting before I had to make these big decisions on what programs I was going to apply to. So, big problem there. Part of it was not necessarily, part of it you can't really control because you don't know when the rotations are available. But this is why I tell students all the time like, be open minded, like, be as open minded as possible. Have all sorts of rotations in the fall so you know what you're getting into. Maybe you actually don't like AmCare. Maybe you actually prefer this other thing instead. Maybe you want a fellowship in industry. Like, you don't know until you actually try it, right? So when I applied to residency, the residency programs, I applied to 8 programs, and they were all VA hospitals for the most part because I just felt like for some reason I was told that the VA was a really great system, and it is a good system, but that doesn't mean that it's the only system. Again, I was just like had false ideas about things. I also did 2 VA rotations in the fall. Had I done more different types of rotations and different settings, I might be more open-minded, but I wasn't. I think that's a huge problem for me was that I just didn't open my mind big enough. Um, but so when I applied to those 8 programs, those are super competitive programs as well. And I kind of realized that, I'm going against people who had all these other really cool experiences compared to me. So here's the other problem that I ran into was that during my 4 years or yeah 4 years of pharmacy school, the first 3 years anyways, i didn't um I didn't like get involved with leadership as much. Leadership is a really big component that makes you stand out. So let's say a program gets 100 applications. The ones with all these leadership experiences are probably going to be up top. And you may not even get an interview just because everybody is applying to those programs, right? And so, these are things that I can't go back and fix. I'm already at my 4th year of rotation. So for the ones who are listening, who's in your first, second, 3rd year, get leadership experiences. Start jumping in right now. Get on, if you can't be the president, if it's too late for that, see if you can be on, be secretary, be treasurer, whatever. Be more involved. Basically, show off your leadership skills. So again, those are probably two of the biggest things that I kind of found myself struggling with was my application probably wasn't as amazing as some of my competitors. And I was also applying for programs that I probably would not like anyways because I probably did not like AmCare. Um, so how do you get around this? Like that's a really big problem when you're applying and then you realize, oh shoot, I should have gone back in time. So like maybe find a time machine. But if you can't find that, what I would say is start networking with people. Start I think start network as in go on LinkedIn, find some of these um, program directors, start interacting with them that way. Make yourself stand out in a different way. You don't have the leadership skills. You may not have the internships that maybe the other applicants have. But what you can do is uh, connect with them on LinkedIn or connect with them on email or connect with them somehow and really show them who you are. I am willing to learn. I am determined. I have perseverance. I have all these great skills that would make me a great resident. Stand out that way. The other thing is take your rotations seriously. If you don't have those leadership skills, if you don't have all these things that make you stand out, your rotation is what will make you stand out. Act like you're an employee at this hospital already. Show off your skills. Be passionate about what you do. Don't wait for your preceptors to prompt you to do things. Get on top of things. Do extra reading, do extra work. Be like, I love what I do. I want to be here. I want this position. I am great at this position. You need me here. Act like that, and you're going to stand out. The whole idea here is to stand out. And let me be honest with you, that was not really what I was trying to do on rotations. And I think that was a huge miss of opportunity there. So hopefully that helped. But let me just explain that, yeah, I applied to 8 programs. I barely got any interviews back, unfortunately. And I did interview for those programs and still I didn't match. And that was a horrible experience. But I really had to learn from those mistakes. And eventually, I did get a residency. So, that's not the end of it's not the end of everything if you don't match the first time.
Yeah, I think talk about not, you know, able to match the first time. And I want to just bring in a point of, because there are a lot of students out there. Residency is very competitive right now. And the fact that like they they will feel like the career is not gonna kickstart if like they don't match for the first time. I just want to touch on the base on upon like how was the feeling that time, and looking back now, how did you feel about it?
I felt pretty disappointed, but with the results that I had gotten, like I didn't get a lot of interview requests, and then I, my chances were low. So I guess in a way I was disappointed, but I wasn't super surprised. So I think when you're finding yourself in this position where you failed and you do feel like, oh no, my career might be over before it even started, that can cause a lot of turmoil. And this is your chance to show yourself that you can overcome that. Because if you can overcome this failure that is pretty epic in proportion, in my opinion, then you can overcome a lot of other things in life, or at least you can overcome a lot of other things in your career. How so massive disappointment, fear of the end, basically. Um, yeah, those are probably the major feelings that I had at the time. It's not great.
Yeah, but I would just want to ask, look upon right now how you're doing right now. What would you tell yourself at that time?
Oh, I would tell this person, you know, I didn't tell, honestly, sorry, I may not answer your question, but I I don't think I would tell her anything different than what she told herself at that time, because what I told myself was like, this is not the end. This is not over. I'm not giving
Oh,
up.
that's great. That's great.
So
That's
like
great. Yeah.
I don't think me looking back now would have been like I would have told her anything different, because what she told herself is exactly what she needed to tell herself.
I mean, that's a great attitude or like great mindset initially. I mean, I think a lot of students could learn this. especially now that residency is getting more and more competitive each year. Um, right. I just want to also like come on, step onto the point where what was the turning point of hope, or is there anything that like when you've eventually get matched, was there a certain relief, or was there a certain moment you say like, hey, this is my push to become a pharmacist or like a clinical pharmacist? um is there something like that?
The turning point, I guess, of hope, um, probably would be when as I mentioned before, I was on an AmCare rotation and I was getting very lukewarm feedback from the preceptors there. But when I was on my ICU rotation, there was just something that just clicked. I don't know if it was because I didn't match and I just feel like, okay, now I really have to give it all I've got, or I just really enjoy what I was doing. But there was this moment where I was like, gosh, I really like acute care. Like in the ICU, my patients are so sick. You have to make very quick decisions. And yet I felt so comfortable and I was so passionate about what I was doing. And I was showing that off to my preceptor at the time. And he saw how much I really enjoy patient care, how much I want to be better, how much I love learning, and how much I wanted to grow, that he, out of all the preceptors I've had before, was like, you need to do a residency. This was the first time that anybody has ever just given me that like validation, which, hey, I don't think you should need validation, but I feel like that's a big turning point from someone that was getting just lukewarm feedback from people to like somebody who's like, I can't believe you didn't match. You need to match. You need to find a way. Like this preceptor was like, you got to do it. You know, this is the right way for you. This is the right path. And so what I ended up, because of that kind of encouragement and then just how I felt on rotation, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. I want to do this. I basically at the time, I know there's a phase one and a phase two, but at the time, phase two was a barely a thing. And so what we actually had was called the scramble, which is essentially a scramble of just like programs that didn't have a resident and residents that didn't have a program, literally scrambled. And I called so many programs. I called them. I was like, I need to talk to the program director. I called so many programs. I got so many rejections. I eventually called this one program and the director did pick up and she said, you know, we're full, but there is this one random, not random, but there is a very new, brand new residency program that's in Indiana. I can send you their information. Would you be interested in that? And I was like, yes, I would do anything, whatever, just give it to me. She sends me the information over. I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this is acute care. It's got some AM care. But this looks like a lot of stuff that I'm looking for a residency now. And my mindset has completely shifted from AM care now to like, I want to be acute care. So I was like, this is actually the right fit for me. This is perfect. So I sent them an email. I applied, and then maybe like a day later, they're like, okay, send us your application. We need letters of recommendation. And the preceptor that I had at that time, the one that really encouraged me to pursue residency, he was like, I'll write you a letter of recommendation. So like there was a huge shift. There was a huge just like personality shift maybe in me, you know, when I was kind of more timid and shy in my previous rotations, to where I was like, I want this. Like, do not take this from me. I'm meant to be here. You know what I mean? So there was such a different mindset. And I feel like when you're in that moment of failure, you have to have that, like, no, this is mine. Like, there's no, absolutely nothing else. But don't wait until you fail to maybe be in that mindset. Start right away. Like your first rotation, you're like, I want to do this, and go for it. You know, don't wait until you're actually having to like be forced to. Um, but basically, yeah, that was kind of my experience. My preceptor at the time wrote me this fantastic letter of recommendation. They interviewed me, and several years later, I am a clinical pharmacist at a hospital working for geriatric patients. It was kind of this dream job that I have always wanted to have. So,
Yeah, perfect. I mean, voila. Like that's how things turned out. So, I mean, from that story on, it is also very important to say like how important it is to have an encouraging preceptor at that moment for students to, take on a challenge, or, don't give up on, your dreams just because that you wasn't matched for the first time. And I think
yeah.
that was very important as well.
Yeah,
So
and I do want to mention from our
yeah.
previous episode about an intimidating preceptor. When I started out this rotation, a lot of my other people were like, "Oh, he's really scary. He's really tough. He's very demanding," and had high expectations. And I was like, "Okay, let's see how this goes." So, comes to show that like just because your preceptors could seem intimidating or whatever, and other people could say that about him, if you show passion and if you show like you want to be there and you want to learn, that will change things around. I promise you.
Great. So moving on to your actual residency experience, state if you have any interesting story during your residency where you have learned or have made an impact in your career as a pharmacist.
Yes, so it's really interesting to go from student to resident because now you're the pharmacist. Now you pick up the phone and you say, "This is pharmacy. I'm the pharmacist. How can I help you?" Right? Instead of like, "Oh, I'm just a student." So it's a different mind shift um, in that sense. The biggest thing that I learned that I still carry with me to this day is that um, be a representation of the pharmacy department. Be a representation of pharmacy. So I had a really great feedback from someone that says we're lucky to have you representing our department when you work with the doctors, when you work with the healthcare team. And that to me, I hold a great pride in. And that's something that I carry with me moving forward. Working with providers can be intimidating, but it can also be super rewarding because then the patient actually gets multidisciplinary care that everybody deserves. And that's probably my favorite part. But the biggest thing that I would say about residency is the skills that you learn to communicate with your preceptor as a student carries with you onto residency. So if you never learned any communication skills as a student, you're going to struggle again. It's the same feedback problems that you have, but to like times 100. You know what I mean? Now you're a pharmacist. Like you are expected to do greater things. Communication wise with your preceptor, conflicts with your preceptors, that can multiply to 100 if you don't know how to maintain that. So remember those skills of communication, taking feedback, and asking for your needs. Those are always really, really important to make sure that you have a well rounded and wholesome experience.
Yeah, that sounds great. Is there any particular tips for students who are, probably at this time of recording or the time of publishing, they're probably in their around 2 to 3 months in their residency. Do you have any maybe further tips for someone who might be applying this upcoming cycle, or things that you learned along the way that really help you solidify someone who is a good resident?
Well, I guess tips wise, if you're doing rotations right now, any really great interventions that you've made, remember to write them down because those are amazing interview answers for questions for interviews. Write down all of your wins and write them to, a good to a good detail, like to a great detail, because then you can really provide that example on your interviews. That would be a really big tip for me. My other tip is I think I've kind of mentioned a lot of it, but the way that you behave on rotations as a student, now that you're in your residency, you are an employee now. You're no longer a student, you're on the payroll. So that means that you should be asking for respect and correct communications from your coworkers. Yes, there is a part of you that's still learning. You still should listen to advice from your colleagues, but they are all your colleagues, right? So if you're a resident, you should be acting and behaving like you are an employee. Show up to those potlucks. Be part of the team, and work with more than just the people that you have to work with. Uh, Create relationships with other pharmacists. Create relationships with the nurses, the doctors. That's probably some really important stuff. If you get the doctors and the nurses on your side, pharmacy department will love it. So work closely with those guys because they can teach you a lot of things as well.
Sounds great. Again, thank you for the great advice, Dr. Nguyen. This is the end of episode 2, and we'll see you in episode 3 for around 2 weeks. Feel free to provide us with any feedbacks in the comments, things that we did well, things that we can cover more. Or as always, hit the like if you enjoyed today's episode and share this with your peers. Share this with your peers who might be going to residency soon, or just applying to residency, or is a resident. Click the subscribe button and notification bell for our latest content. Go give a follow to our social media as well as Dr. Lens. Thank you everyone for watching, and don't forget to empower your PharmD. Thank you.
Thank you.